Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
I'm Whitney, host of the Real Estate Syndication Show. Every day, I'm interviewing experts that will help you to successfully invest in or grow your syndication business. Hit the like and subscribe button so you'll be on track to learn from the best in the industry. Have you heard of the friendship factor? I bet you've not heard of it before. Well, today, our guest, Petekelly, is going to explain to you why that is so important at your multifamily community. It's so important. He's going to tell you how understanding the friendship factor is going to help you increase your NOI. And if you've been in this business very long, whether you're an active or passive investor, you're going to understand that, hey, increasing that NOI on that commercial piece of real estate, that large multifamily property, has significant impact on the value, right, in a good way. And so he's going to tell you how you can do this through ways that you haven't thought of before, but also research that they've done to prove how this works and that it works. And he shares many examples today of why this is so important at your community. Pete, welcome to the show. I know it's interesting. You and I met a few years back, I think at an NMHC conference or one of those where you all were leading a large breakfast and lots of operators there learning about apartment life and what you all do, how you help communities, how you help operators. I'm looking forward to getting into that today because I know there's many operators that listen and even many investors, I think, that would love to see operators they're investing with utilize something like you all that because they can see, hopefully after this interview, how it helps everyone involved. I know as you and I have gotten to know each other a little better, I know we're pursuing to use you all as well, as we, especially with our larger communities. And but first, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, Pete, a little bit about, briefly about apartment life and what that is, but how you got there. And then I want to dive into some of the research that's been done and, and what you all do specifically at these communities and how that helps everyone.
Sure. Well, Apartment Life, we are a faith-based nonprofit that's been serving the multifamily industry for 21 years. And I would love to say that I was part of the founding of it, but I was not. I worked for 24 years with a collegiate ministry called Crew and moved over to Apartment Life 6 years ago, first as the president, now as the CEO. But we're really kind of founded on the basic proposition that relationships are not just good for the soul, they're also good for the bottom line. So we have a program that helps build relationships in apartment communities that is of great benefit to the residents, but also to the owners and the management.
Awesome. So, I guess let's talk a little bit about how an operator works with somebody like you, like Apartment Life. What does that relationship look like? How do you get started? And then we'll dive into some of the details.
Sure. Yeah. So, I'll give just a broad overview of the program and how it works. But in our traditional model, we place two people that live in that apartment community, and they're like the welcome wagon. They greet every new resident that moves in. They throw all the parties and events. They look for opportunities to care for people, like a job change or the birth of a child. Maybe the car is broken down in the parking lot and the team comes over to help them out. So they're caring for people. They're connecting them in relationships. And as they do that, it creates this sticky community where people want to stay even when the rent goes up. So we're there officially on behalf of management. So when we enter into a contract with an apartment owner management company, we provide them a candidate that we feel like would be a good fit for that community. And then the apartment manager actually interviews them and has the last right of refusal on them. And as long as that coordinator or that two coordinators, sometimes we'll place one, sometimes we'll place two, but as long as they meet their approval, they'll conduct the program under the guidance of the management team on site.
I think that's great to know. Like the apartment manager, the local manager there, or that operator has the final say in interviewing this individual or couple that's going to come and be a part of that community there. I think that's helpful to know. But also, so this couple moves in, and their goal is to become a part of the community, right? Build community. What are some ways that they do that? How do they get involved? They move in. What kind of happens next?
Yeah, so I mean, we look for people who really want to embody the adage, love your neighbor as yourself. And so though they're there officially on behalf of management, we're looking for people who would be doing this regardless of whether or not they were being paid or hired to do something like this. But again, they're always on the lookout for people to meet them. So they could be just walking their dog and striking up conversation with their neighbors. Certainly when they host events, they are there to be the connector. So not only are they preparing all the food and preparing the theme of the event, when people come in, they're there to help people get to know their neighbors. And so they don't want all relationships leading back to them, but although they do want to build relationships with their neighbors, they're also looking to connect neighbors with other neighbors. And so when they find people who have common interests, they say, hey, you guys have this in common. You guys should talk some more. So they're looking for that way to build kind of a web of relationships in that community where people feel genuinely known and cared for. So one way to think about it, if you go back to the days when you're a college student, think about a resident advisor, an RA that you would have in the dorm. They're just kind of there to look out for people to make sure that they feel well cared for.
Do the tenants or the residents there see this couple or this individual as another resident, or do they see them as like an employee of the management company or the apartment community? How are they represented, I guess, to the community?
Yeah. So they are there officially on behalf of management, and they're also neighbors. And so they're a little bit of a both and, which puts them in a middle ground. And the beautiful thing about that is people will let their guard down with the apartment life team because they know that the primary reason that team is there is to care for them. They're not there to collect rent. They're not there to enforce policies or anything like that. They're just simply there to look out for the well-being of their neighbors. And so a lot of times what will happen is that their neighbors will let their guard down and they'll share helpful feedback that would be very valuable for the management team. And so because the apartment life team sort of lives in both worlds, obviously the primary world, they're representing the management company, but they're able to bring some of that intel back to the management team and say, hey, we just met with this couple that moved in. They had generally a good move-in experience, but there were some spots on the carpet. And I think if we were able to fix the spots on the carpet, they would be 100% happy with their move-in experience. So it's just a little information like that goes a long way to make that residence experience all the better.
Tell us a little bit about, I know you all have done some research around what this does for the community, and you'll have learned a lot through that. Share some of that, because I think it's helpful for a listener or an operator that's listening to hear, there's you all have done the research to see, hey, this actually does work. There's so many benefits, whether the operator, has, a specific type of faith or not, it's beneficial, right? On many levels. Explain some of that research that was done and what you all learned.
Yeah, so you would think with all these people living in such close proximity that apartments would be kind of the most wonderful connected places to live. But unfortunately, the opposite's often true is most people living in apartments don't know their neighbors at all. They feel very disconnected. They feel very lonely, even more so than they would in a single family neighborhood. And again, that's not what you'd expect because there's all these common grounds and this opportunity to bring the community together. But what we found through our research over the years is that the more friendships a resident has, the happier they are. And it would seem like the magic number is about 7. We've worked with Witten advisors to do different studies. One of the studies that they did was called the friendship factor. What they found is that when an apartment resident knows 7 of their neighbors, they're almost twice as likely to renew their lease as the resident who doesn't know any of their neighbors at all. And so, again, it's just an example where relationships are not just good for the human soul, they're also good for the bottom line.
Yes, that's incredible. What about any examples that you could share of some specific communities? Obviously, you don't have to share a name of a community or operator, but like maybe some actual numbers that, hey, this was happening at this community and this is how we helped and what happened because of it.
Well, a number of years ago, in addition to kind of the annual property management survey that we collect from property managers about the impact that the program's having, sometimes we'll do focus groups. So I remember this one specific focus group in Charleston, South Carolina, where we got residents together and we just asked them, like, tell us what was the impact that the sense of community that you've experienced in this community had on you renewing your lease. And I remember one couple in particular said, well, our rent went up by 18% this year and we're still here. So that tells you something. I love that study. One of my other favorite stories is about a woman named Kathy in Houston. And I don't think I mentioned this, but one of the things that our teams will do is they'll do a renewal visit. So 90 to 120 days before a resident's lease is set, our team comes say, hey, are you thinking about renewing your lease? So in this case, the Apartment Life team was coming by to visit Kathy. She was a single mom with a young daughter. And they said, hey, Kathy, we've really enjoyed getting to know you at the events. What are you thinking about next year? And she says, well, I've had this bug infestation that management has not been able to address. And so I've decided I've already put a deposit down on the new place. And my plan is to move out. And so they were like, oh, gosh, we're so sorry to hear that. We've loved getting to know you. We're really going to miss you. And so later that night, Kathy emailed them back and said, ever since you visited, I've been thinking about the sense of community that I've got here. And this is the kind of environment I want to raise my daughter in. And she said, I decided to let go of my deposit and I'm going to renew my lease. And I thought, wow, that is a big turnaround, and to let go of a deposit and to do an about face like that. But again, it shows you the power of relationship. If you're an apartment owner, you probably don't think a lot about the impact that loneliness has on your business. But when your residents are lonely, there are no roots holding them in that community. That apartment that they're renting is just a shell. And it's just a commodity. And if the apartment community down the road offers a good enough incentive, they're going to pack up and go live over there unless they have roots in their community. And so, again, that's where we don't just appeal to apartment owners for, the powerful impact that this has in people's lives, but this just makes really good business sense.
Happening on January 20th and 21st is Denver's biggest real estate event, the next big thing. And it's shaking up how real estate professionals will define business success. This 2-day event will give you tools so you can catapult your own business. You'll discuss how the world is changing and what's needed to stay 2 steps ahead. Together with 450 other professionals, you will build a foundation to become the next big thing. Built on the foundation of helping others build wealth through real estate, the Ruth team has created the ultimate tool that is this event, and it's called The Next Big Thing. 25 speakers, including Ryan Serhant, Kenyon Salo, Nebu Hatta, Stacy Veeden, Brian Moses, Natalie Davis, and Ryan Avery. Register now at thenextbigthingcolorado.com and use the code RESS to get $150 off. Now, tell me, as you all are communicating with operators often and new operators, what's going to be the biggest holdback for most operators from moving forward with something like this, or maybe the biggest risk that they're concerned about?
Yeah, so the most common objection that we'll hear from operators is, well, should my on-site team be hosting all of those events? So the first thing I'll say is our program is much broader than just the events, but obviously the events, that's a big kind of the most prominent tip of the iceberg, if you will, the most visible part of the program. And My reply to them is yes, your team can throw an event if by throwing an event you mean putting food out on a table in a common area and emailing all your residents. Now, I lived in a community that did that, okay? Every Sunday or every other Sunday, they would put, Chick-fil-A breakfast biscuits out and email all the residents, say, hey, some free food if you want to come down. But what I noticed in that environment is everybody who came sat by themselves and nobody interacted with any of their neighbors.
Or probably got it and left.
Yes, that's the other thing. Because most people are introverted. Over 50% of the American population would be self-described introverts. And so they come in a situation like that where they already feel a little awkward. And all they see is the food and a bunch of people they don't know. And I mean, put yourself in there, or I'm asking the listeners, put yourself in there. What would you do? Well, some of you would reach out and get to know your neighbors, but a lot of you wouldn't. And what our teams do is they do more than put the food out. They're really that catalyst that are proactively introducing themselves to the new people who are walking and connecting those new people with other people in the room. Say, hey, have you met Sam over here? Have you met Beth? And so that's, I think, what really sets our events apart from what a management team can do. And when you describe an event like that to the average operator, they'll go, oh yeah, my on-site staff, they don't have time to do that. Or the emotional bandwidth. Most on-site staff all week, they're hearing complaints. They're hearing complaints. This is broken. I stepped in poop in the common area, or whatever the complaint will be. The last thing they want to do is at the end of the week, throw a big party for all these residents that have been complaining to them all week. And so we say, just outsource that to us. We would love to take that off your shoulders.
Yeah.
So once the management team is really enlisted with Apartment Life, they love it. They love it because it just makes their job so much easier. And the residents are indeed happier.
That's incredible. What about, I know listeners who are thinking about this or wanting to reach out to you all, are thinking about the cost, right? How does, what's this cost the operator? Does this affect the NOI? How do they look at that? What kind of expense should they expect?
Yeah, so we're in the middle of changing our costs. So, in 2022, our costs are going to go up. So the numbers that I'm going to give you are 2021 costs. But for most markets, the cost is $650 a month. That's the primary outlay of cash that the owners would pay, $650 a month. Some markets, it's $750. In addition to that, they concede a 2-bedroom unit to Apartment Life that we give to the team to live in. And the team does pay us a little bit to live in that unit, which keeps that management fee, that $650 a month, lower than it would otherwise be. So the first cost is the $650 a month or $750 in markets, the conceded 2-bedroom unit. And then finally, and this is normally already in the budget, some kind of event budget for the team to work with. And we recommend $1.50 to do $2 per unit per month so that Apartment Life team or coordinator has the wherewithal to really throw really good parties and events to bring the community together. So.
No, that's just great to know. I think give them an expectation, but I just want to bring something to the operator's mind that's listening as well. Like think about the cost of one turnover, right? Think about the cost of one family or couple or individual moving out and having to remarket, clean, get that apartment ready again. I mean, one, it's going to cost that much typically, right? Often, and so I just encourage them to think about that. Just this couple or this individual that's going around even doing just what you call them renewal visits, right? There's so much value in that, right? And going early enough to say, hey, what issues are you experiencing? What's it going to take for you to stay? We care about you ultimately, right? Is so valuable and would go such a long ways. So what about, what size apartment communities, who's the best fit for this? Is it, if somebody has a 20 unit building versus a, 400 unit building, where do we fit, with something like what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have served owners that have as few as 48 units, but I would say normally you would probably want 175 to 200 units or more for it to, to concede the 2-bedroom unit, you kind of want a certain scale and to be able to afford the $650 a month. So certainly we could serve anyone who wanted us, but in terms of what probably makes the most sense from a budgetary perspective, I would say probably 200 units and above makes the most sense.
Okay. I meant to ask you also earlier a little more about how these people are selected for the community. The individuals that you all decide to place somewhere. I'm sure some operators would be concerned about, well, how do I know they're a good fit for the community or somebody we can trust? Or how do you do that?
Yeah, well, we put a lot of work into the selection process. And I would say on average for every 12 people who apply, one will actually make it through the placement. And so we're looking for people, who aren't just doing it for the reduced rent. So that's one of the first things we vet for is what's driving this. If it's just, hey, I want reduced rent, then we say this isn't a really good program. We're looking for those people, again, who really want to embody the phrase, love your neighbor as yourself. And so often, our coordinators will come from churches, probably 75% of our coordinators are just recruited by our existing coordinators. But we're looking for people who really kind of want to live that way, have kind of a gift for hospitality and making people feel welcome. And then we'll spend a lot of time training and developing them. So we train them in fair housing. We train them in all aspects of the program. We have video training. We have one-on-one training. We have small group training. We have monthly reinforcements. We have an end of the month closeout where every month we report back to the management. So we have a pretty robust people development system in place for these. But again, at the end of the day, everyone that we would bring for that initial interview with the property manager would kind of have been through some preliminary training, and the property manager ultimately gets to make the decision, yay or nay on them.
You were reading my mind. My next question was going to be about training. How do they know how to do this? And so that's incredible. I mean, they receive, sounds like often, lots of training, but also recurring training. It sounds like, they're staying involved with you all. And actually another question around that. What about any KPIs, anything that you all measure or anything that helps you to see, hey, is this actually working at this community?
Yeah, so we do measure almost everything. And I would say if I had a coordinator next to me, an apartment life team next to me who were to say, what's the hardest part of your job? They would probably say the amount of reporting that I need to do, because we ask them to report on everything. We want to know how many people showed up to the event, how many people were you able to do a welcome visit with this week or this month, how many renewal visits. Every Monday, they send a weekly recap to the property manager. And then at the end of the month, there's also kind of a very data-driven report that the property manager gives, along with pictures and some of the commentary in terms of special acts of care that they've done for the residents. So it's pretty robust. And that would probably be if our coordinator said, hey, the hardest part of our job is not loving our neighbors, is actually reporting on how we're loving our neighbors.
That's awesome. And I'm sure you're probably tracking that alongside, say, vacancy and renewals and things like that as well. So you can see that happening and that has those relationships build. And actually, one final question around that. What is the normal time frame to actually start seeing results? Is it a month? Is it 6 months, a year? What do you expect there typically?
We work with Witten Advisors. They're an economic research firm that's well regarded within the apartment industry. And at the end of 1 year, after the program's been in place 1 year, we can do a Witten impact study that'll show the economic impact that the program has had on the community. It's a survey-based study that we do where we survey the residents, hear directly from them along with the management team. And on average, Witten Advisors would say, as they've done these over the years, they would say on average, you're saving your clients $188,000 a year between resident turnover or resident retention, staff retentions. That's a piece that a lot of people don't think about, although right now, in the midst of the Great Resignation, people are thinking more about how do I hold on to my on-site staff. But the program has been proven to hold on to your good employees. So that's the second thing. And then marketing costs. So $188,000 a year to the NOI is what our program brings to the average owner. So yeah, after a year, I give it a year to really know for sure, because it takes a while to build relationships and for the residents to be fully aware that this program exists for them.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That is awesome. I didn't think about the connection on the current employees there, the management, the management team, and how it would affect them, and really relieving them, right, of some things, and growing their team in a way that they're not almost responsible for, managing somebody else. Well, Pete, just a couple more questions. Pete, what about some daily habits that you have that have just helped you achieve, this level of success?
Yeah. So, boy, that's a great question. Daily habits. Well, my personal habit, I'm a follower of Jesus, so I'm a Christ follower. So one of my daily habits is to spend a little bit of time in the scriptures reflecting on a different attribute that God would want to have in my life. And yesterday was humility. Today is boldness. But I have 31 of these attributes that one day a month, I just kind of reflect on that attribute. And how could I live that out? And so I'd say that's one daily habit I have now for people who are listening to the show. They may be of a different faith entirely or of no faith. But my encouragement to them is, regardless of whether or not you have a religious faith, like thinking of an attribute that you want to have true in your life, that you want to live out, and kind of mapping that out over the course of a month and really deeply reflecting on that. I think that's something that any of us could do, and most of us would want to do.
Incredible. Appreciate you sharing that. What about, how do you like to give back?
Well, certainly generosity with your finances, with my finances, is a very important thing. But I think being engaged in the community around us. So one of the things that the church that we're involved with does is that we help out with a refugee ministry here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So in Southern Fort Worth, there's an apartment community that is just chock full of people from around the world who've had to flee their countries due to war or persecution. And so probably one of the most rewarding volunteer experiences we've had as a family is each month going down there and helping out with food distribution. And it's not just, us as Americans coming and meeting the needs, but what's really been fun is seeing the people, the refugees themselves, helping one another carry food back to their apartments, carry food to their cars. A lot of times the kids of the parents, the refugee kids, will help out with the distribution. And so it's been super, super rewarding.
I appreciate you sharing that. We've personally been involved as a family locally with distributing some food to families like that. And I just, as much as anything, I want my children to be involved in that, right? And giving and seeing that, hey, not everyone is fortunate, as they are. But yes, I appreciate you sharing that, Pete. And you even mentioning doing that as a family. It's incredible, and giving back in that way. But grateful to just you sharing about apartment life. And I just hope it exposes our listeners, operators, to this option of, hey, how they can build a better community and how it can directly affect positively their NOI, right? And ultimately the value of their property, right? So I just think that that's so valuable to know that this is out there, that this is a service, something that they can outsource, that I just think compared to the cost has drastic positive impact, on not just the income of the property, but just the value or the tenant's life, right? Personally inside the community themselves. So, Pete, grateful. Thank you so much for the show today. Tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you and apartment life.
Sure. Yeah. If you want to read more about apartment life, you can go to our website, apartmentlife.org. And we've got all the information that I spoke about today on the website. But if you want to reach out to me personally, petekelly, petekelly at apartmentlife.org. That's my email address, petekelly at apartmentlife.org. Whitney, thank you again for having me on the show. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate. while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.